Welcome to my YouTube channel, The Storyverse Legends. On my channel, the video I upload doesn't contain any AI content, any robotics, or any fake voices. So, without any wasting of time, let's go to the video.
The desert had a way of swallowing sound after midnight. On the lonely stretch of Route 66 cutting through northern Arizona, there were no crowded highways, no glowing city lights, and no comforting signs of civilization. Only endless black pavement, towering sandstone cliffs, and the occasional silhouette of a dead cactus standing against the moonlit horizon. The wind pushed dust across the road like drifting smoke, while distant flashes of lightning flickered beyond the mountains without a single drop of rain. Marcus Reed had driven these roads for nearly 20 years. He knew every curve, every abandoned gas station, and every faded motel whose neon signs had stopped working decades ago. Long-haul trucking wasn't just his job anymore, it was the only life he understood. The quiet suited him. Out on the highway, nobody asked questions, and nobody cared where a man had been before sunrise. His 18-wheeler rumbled steadily through the darkness, its headlights carving a narrow tunnel through the empty desert. The CB radio crackled to life. "Anybody rolling east through Devil's Mile?" Marcus reached for the microphone. "That's me." A tired voice answered almost immediately. "Keep your wheels turning tonight. Don't stop for anybody." Marcus smiled to himself. "You expecting trouble?" There was a long pause. Then another driver replied in a lower voice. "Not trouble." Another pause. The passenger. Static swallowed the transmission before Marcus could ask another question. He chuckled and set the microphone back into its holder. Truck drivers loved ghost stories. Every highway had one. Some swore they'd seen phantom headlights following them for hours. Others claimed abandoned diners served customers who had died years earlier. Marcus never believed any of it. Road fatigue could make the mind invent almost anything. The truck rolled past an old wooden sign barely hanging from rusted chains. "Welcome to Devil's Mile, population." Zero. Marcus glanced at it only briefly before returning his eyes to the road. The mile stretched endlessly ahead. Nothing moved. Nothing lived. Then, nearly 15 minutes later, something appeared in the distance. A person, standing perfectly still on the shoulder of the highway. Marcus frowned. Nobody walked this section of Route 66 after dark. The nearest town was over 40 miles away, and there wasn't a single service station between here and the state line. As the truck drew closer, the figure became clearer. A man, tall, thin, dressed entirely in black. His clothes looked strangely untouched by the blowing dust, and he carried no backpack, no flashlight, and no luggage of any kind. One hand rested calmly at his side while the other was raised with his thumb extended, asking for a ride. Marcus hesitated. The warning from the CB radio echoed in his thoughts. "Don't stop for anybody." He tightened his grip on the steering wheel. The truck rolled past the stranger. For several seconds, Marcus watched him disappear in the side mirror. Then guilt crept into his mind. Maybe the man had broken down. Maybe someone had abandoned him. Leaving a person alone in the middle of the Arizona desert at 2 in the morning didn't sit right with him. Marcus sighed. He eased onto the brakes. The massive truck slowed before pulling onto the shoulder. The engine idled with a deep growl as he watched the man approach through the mirror. His footsteps were slow, almost effortless. The passenger climbed into the cab without asking permission. He closed the door gently. "Appreciate the lift," he said. His voice was calm, almost friendly. Marcus nodded once. "No problem. Where are you headed?" The man looked straight ahead instead of answering. "Same place you are?" Marcus assumed he meant the next town. He shifted the truck back into gear. The highway swallowed them once again. For nearly 10 miles, neither man spoke. Only the low hum of the diesel engine filled the cab. Finally, the passenger broke the silence. "You still carry that silver pocket watch?" Marcus instinctively touched the small watch resting inside his jacket. His heartbeat slowed. He had never mentioned it. The stranger continued quietly. "It belonged to your father." Marcus stared ahead. "How'd you know that?" The passenger smiled faintly. "It was the last thing he gave you before the accident." Marcus's hands tightened around the steering wheel. No one knew about the watch. No one knew what happened that day, because Marcus had never told a single soul. Outside, the desert wind suddenly died. Inside the cab, the CB radio crackled with soft whispers instead of static. Then the passenger spoke one final sentence without turning his head. "You never told anyone what happened that rainy night." He slowly looked at Marcus. "But I was there." Marcus Reed's pulse hammered against his ribs. The words echoed inside the cab long after the stranger stopped speaking. "I was there." That couldn't be possible. The accident had happened 23 years earlier, on a rain-soaked back road outside Flagstaff. No witnesses, no passing cars, just Marcus and his father. Whatever had truly happened that night had stayed buried in Marcus's memory ever since. He forced himself to keep his eyes on the highway. "There wasn't anybody else there," Marcus said, his voice steady but tight. The passenger stared through the windshield, expressionless. "That's what you've told yourself?" Marcus gripped the steering wheel harder. "Who are you?" No answer. The silence was worse than any explanation. Outside, the headlights cut through the darkness, illuminating miles of cracked asphalt and desert brush. The moon had disappeared behind thick clouds, leaving the landscape swallowed in black. Marcus made a decision. He wasn't spending another mile with this man. A weathered gas station appeared ahead, its flickering open sign barely hanging on to life. It looked forgotten, like it had been left behind decades ago. Marcus pulled the rig into the empty parking lot. The brakes hissed as the truck came to a stop. He turned toward the passenger. "Rides over?" The man simply smiled. "I know." Marcus climbed down from the cab without waiting for a response. Cool desert air rushed over him as he slammed the truck door behind him. The station looked deserted except for a single light burning inside the convenience store. An elderly clerk stood behind the counter reading a newspaper. Marcus hurried inside. "Evening," the old man said without looking up. Marcus glanced over his shoulder. "You got a phone I can use?" The clerk pointed toward the back wall. As Marcus reached for it, he lowered his voice. "That man riding with me. Have you seen him before?" The clerk frowned. "What man?" Marcus blinked. "The hitchhiker. Black clothes, tall guy." The old man slowly looked through the front window toward the truck. "I only saw you pull in." Marcus laughed nervously. "No, he was sitting right there." The clerk shook his head. "Son, there wasn't anybody else in that truck." A chill crawled up Marcus's spine. "No, that's impossible." Without another word, he rushed outside. The passenger door was open, the seat empty. Marcus searched around the truck, shining his flashlight across the fuel pumps, the dumpsters, and the dark edges of the property. Nothing. No footprints, no movement. No sign anyone had ever been there. He let out a slow breath. Maybe exhaustion had finally caught up with him. Maybe the old stories about lonely highways were right after all. Trying to calm himself, Marcus climbed back into the driver's seat. He shut the door, started the engine, adjusted the mirrors, then froze. The passenger was sitting exactly where he'd been before, hands folded neatly in his lap, looking straight ahead. Marcus jerked backward, nearly hitting the window. "What the hell?" The man turned slowly. "You shouldn't leave your doors unlocked." Marcus stared in disbelief. "I searched everywhere." "I know. You weren't there." "I wasn't." Marcus felt the air inside the cab grow strangely cold. His breath became visible. Every dashboard light flickered at once. The GPS screen suddenly flashed bright white before filling with a single sentence in black letters. "No route found." The screen went dark. Marcus grabbed his phone. No signal. Not even an emergency connection. Outside, he noticed something even stranger. The gas station was gone. He looked through the driver's window. Where the building had stood only seconds earlier, there was now nothing but open desert stretching beneath the stars. No lights, no fuel pumps, no tire tracks. As though the station had never existed, Marcus's breathing became shallow. His truck was once again rolling down Route 66, but he couldn't remember putting it in gear. The engine hummed steadily beneath him, carrying them deeper into the darkness. The passenger finally broke the silence. "You keep looking for a way off this road." Marcus swallowed hard. "There has to be one." The stranger slowly turned toward him, his pale eyes reflecting the glow of the dashboard. "The road isn't trapping you, Marcus." A faint smile spread across his face. "Your past is—" Marcus Reed had driven millions of miles across America. He had crossed mountain passes buried in snow, deserts shimmering beneath summer heat, and highways so lonely they seemed forgotten by time. But no road had ever felt like the one stretching before him now. The white lines on the pavement looked faded, almost ancient. The asphalt was cracked in strange patterns that seemed to shift every time his headlights swept across them. His GPS remained black. His phone was nothing more than a dead piece of glass. Even the truck's dashboard clock had stopped. Its glowing red numbers were frozen at 2:17 a.m. No matter how many miles the truck traveled, the time never changed. Marcus glanced at the passenger. The stranger sat perfectly still, watching the darkness ahead as if he had traveled this road countless times before. "Where are we?" Marcus finally asked. The passenger answered without emotion. "A place that isn't meant to be found." Marcus clenched his jaw. "There's no such place." The man smiled faintly. "There is." After midnight, the desert around them no longer looked familiar. The towering red mesas had vanished. Instead, endless gray hills rolled beneath a sky where the stars seemed strangely dim. Even the moon had disappeared. Then Marcus noticed something along the shoulder. An old pickup truck. Its rusted body leaned against a broken guardrail. The vehicle looked like it had been sitting there for decades. As Marcus drove past, he saw the driver's door hanging open. No one was inside. A few miles later, another abandoned vehicle appeared. This one was a faded police cruiser. Its emergency lights were cracked. The paint had nearly peeled away. Dust covered every inch of it. Then another. A school bus. Then an RV. Then a motorcycle lying on its side. None of them looked wrecked. They simply looked abandoned, as though their owners had vanished without warning. Marcus's stomach tightened. Who left all these vehicles? The passenger's eyes never moved. People who couldn't finish their journey. Before Marcus could ask another question, movement caught his attention. Someone stood beside the next abandoned car. A woman. She waved both arms desperately. Marcus slammed on the brakes. The truck skidded to a stop. He climbed out before the engine had fully settled. "Ma'am." She turned toward him. Relief flooded her face. "Oh, thank God," she said, running toward him. "You've got to get out of here." Marcus frowned. "What happened?" She looked over his shoulder toward the truck. Her face instantly lost all color. "You picked him up." Marcus slowly nodded. Who is he? Tears filled the woman's eyes. I don't know his name, her voice trembled, but everyone who gives him a ride disappears. Marcus felt the blood drain from his face. What are you talking about? I've been trapped here, she whispered. I don't even know how long. She looked desperately into Marcus's eyes. Don't listen to anything he tells you. Suddenly, the desert wind stopped. Complete silence filled the highway. The woman slowly backed away. No. Her frightened eyes were fixed on something behind Marcus. He found me again. Marcus spun around. The passenger was standing in the middle of the road. He hadn't opened the truck door. He hadn't made a sound. Yet there he was, calm, motionless. Watching them, Marcus turned back toward the woman. She was gone, completely gone. The empty highway stretched in every direction. Only her abandoned sedan remained. Its doors hung open. Its headlights were still on. Marcus searched the roadside, calling out for her. No answer. It was as if she had never existed. A cold breeze swept across the desert once more. The passenger walked toward him at an unhurried pace. There are others, Marcus said, struggling to keep his voice steady. The man nodded. There have always been others. What happened to them? They carried something heavier than they could bear. Marcus stared at him. What are you talking about? The passenger stopped only a few feet away. You think you're hauling freight across Arizona? He tilted his head slightly. But the heaviest load in that truck? His eyes locked onto Marcus's. Has always been your guilt. At that moment, Marcus heard a sound coming from inside the trailer. A loud bang. Then another bang. Something more. Someone was pounding from inside the sealed cargo trailer. And whatever was trapped in there wanted out. The pounding inside the trailer grew louder. Bang, bang. Each blow shook the entire 18-wheeler, rattling the mirrors and vibrating through the frame. Marcus Reed stared at the rear of the truck, his heart hammering in his chest. That trailer had been sealed before he left the freight yard. He had personally checked the lock. No one could have gotten inside. The passenger stood silently a few feet away, hands folded behind his back, watching Marcus with unsettling patience. It wasn't making those sounds before, Marcus said. No, the passenger replied calmly. It wasn't ready. Marcus ignored him and sprinted toward the back of the trailer. The steel doors trembled with every violent impact from inside. He grabbed the heavy locking bar with both hands. Another deafening slam nearly knocked him backward. Whoever or whatever was inside wanted out. Marcus hesitated. Every instinct told him to leave the doors shut, but another part of him couldn't ignore the possibility that someone needed help. He unlocked the latch. The metal doors slowly creaked open. Darkness filled the trailer. Not ordinary darkness. It was so deep that Marcus couldn't even see the opposite wall, though he knew it was only 50 feet away. He switched on his flashlight. The beam disappeared into the blackness as though the light itself had been swallowed. Then came the whisper, soft, familiar. Marcus. His breath caught. He hadn't heard that voice in over 20 years. It was his father's son. Marcus's hands began to shake. This isn't real, he whispered. The voice came again. I'm still waiting. Marcus took one cautious step into the trailer. The floor no longer felt like steel. It felt like wet pavement. Cold rain tapped against his shoulders. The smell of diesel fuel mixed with soaked earth filled the air. He blinked. The trailer was gone. He was standing on a narrow country road beneath a violent thunderstorm. Lightning split the sky. Ahead of him sat an old pickup truck crushed against an oak tree. Its windshield was shattered. Smoke curled from beneath the hood. Marcus's breathing became uneven. He recognized the truck instantly. It was his father's. The same truck from the night everything changed. A younger version of himself stood beside the wreck, frozen in panic. Marcus watched his younger self take one frightened step backward, then another. Instead of running toward the wreckage, the younger Marcus ran away. He disappeared into the darkness, leaving the crash behind. Marcus closed his eyes. He had spent years convincing himself he had done everything he could. But now the truth stood before him. He hadn't stayed. He hadn't called for help. Fear had won. The passenger's voice echoed through the storm. Memory has a way of protecting the guilty. Marcus slowly turned. The passenger stood untouched by the rain. You've spent your life rewriting that night. Marcus lowered his head. I was just a kid. You were. I was scared. You were. I've regretted it every day. The passenger nodded. I know. The storm suddenly vanished. Marcus found himself standing in the middle of a deserted town. Weathered buildings lined both sides of the empty street. Every storefront window reflected a different moment from his life. His first trucking job, his wedding, his divorce, the funeral, the years of lonely highways. Each memory played silently like an old film. This place, Marcus whispered. What is it? The crossroads, the passenger answered. The place where every soul carrying unbearable guilt eventually arrives. The wind carried distant voices through the empty streets. Hundreds of whispers, hundreds of regrets. The passenger stepped closer. I can end your suffering. Marcus looked up. One choice. The shadows around the buildings began to move. Dark figures slowly emerged, their faces hidden beneath tattered hoods. They formed a silent circle around Marcus. The passenger pointed toward the far end of town. A frightened young traveler stood alone beside a broken-down car, completely unaware of what surrounded him. Take his place, the passenger said quietly. Leave him here, and you'll drive away with a clean soul. Marcus stared at the terrified stranger, then back at the passenger. The offer hung in the cold desert air like a loaded gun. Every regret, every nightmare, every sleepless night could disappear forever. All it would cost was someone else's life. Marcus Reed stood frozen at the crossroads, the desert wind swirling dust around his boots. The frightened young traveler looked no older than 25. His pickup sat on the shoulder of the road with its hood raised, and panic filled his eyes as he searched the empty highway for help. He had no idea what waited in the shadows. The hooded figures stood silently around Marcus, their faces hidden beneath darkness. They didn't move. They simply watched. The passengers spoke in the same calm voice. One decision. Marcus looked at the young man again. If I leave him here, he asked quietly, what happens? The passenger's expression never changed. He takes your place, and me. You drive away. No more guilt. No more nightmares. No more memories. For a brief moment, the offer tempted Marcus. He imagined waking up without the crushing weight he'd carried for more than 2 decades. No more sleepless nights. No more replaying the accident. No more wondering what might have happened if he had stayed with his father instead of running. It would all be gone. But so would another innocent life. Marcus slowly shook his head. No. The passenger raised an eyebrow. You've carried this burden long enough. I know. You can finally be free. Marcus looked directly into the stranger's pale eyes. Not at someone else's expense. Silence settled over the crossroads. Then, for the first time, the passenger smiled not with satisfaction, but with something closer to respect. You've learned what most never do. The hooded figures dissolved into drifting dust. The ghost town trembled. Buildings cracked apart before collapsing into clouds of sand that disappeared into the desert wind. The reflections in the windows faded one by one until nothing remained except open highway beneath. A sky slowly brightening with the first hints of dawn. The passenger stepped toward Marcus. His appearance began to change. The black coat dissolved into swirling smoke. His face became impossible to focus on, shifting between young and old, familiar and unknown. His eyes glowed like burning embers, yet they held no hatred, only certainty. You expected a devil with horns, he said. Marcus couldn't answer. I am older than every road you've ever traveled. The voice echoed across the desert. I exist wherever regret refuses to die. You, Marcus whispered. What are you? The ancient being gave no direct answer. I am the companion every guilty soul eventually meets. A powerful wind swept across the highway. The swirling smoke wrapped around the figure until nothing remained. The passenger was gone. Marcus blinked. He was sitting behind the wheel of his truck. The engine hummed peacefully. Morning sunlight spilled across the Arizona desert. His GPS suddenly came back to life. The dashboard clock flashed 6:42 a.m. His phone buzzed with missed messages from dispatch asking why he had stopped for several hours. Marcus stepped outside. The highway looked completely normal. No ghost town. No abandoned vehicles. No endless darkness. Just Route 66 stretching toward the horizon. Weeks passed. Marcus finished his deliveries, but something inside him had changed. He finally visited his father's grave for the first time in years. He spoke aloud the truth he had hidden from everyone, including himself, and for the first time since that rainy night, the weight on his shoulders felt lighter. Yet some roads never forget. Late one autumn evening, Marcus found himself driving another lonely stretch of Route 66. The stars were bright. The highway was empty. Then his headlights caught the outline of a lone hitchhiker standing beside the road. Tall, dressed in black, thumb raised, Marcus's grip tightened on the steering wheel. Without slowing down, he kept driving. The figure disappeared into the darkness behind him. A mile later, Marcus glanced into his side mirror. The road was empty. No hitchhiker. No footprints. Nothing. He let out a slow breath. Then the CB radio crackled. Static filled the cab. A familiar voice emerged from the speaker. Soft, calm, patient. Drive carefully, Marcus. A long pause followed. We'll meet again. The signal hissed. When your road finally ends, the radio fell silent. Marcus never looked back again. But from that night on, every trucker who crossed that lonely stretch of Route 66 told the same story. Just before dawn, they sometimes spotted a man dressed in black, standing beside the highway with his thumb raised. Most drivers never stopped. The few who did were never quite the same when they returned.
Welcome back, friends. I hope you watched the whole video and enjoyed a lot. Please show your love and support. For more videos, like, share, comment, subscribe and hit the bell icon button. Thank you.